Ladies and gentlemen, we have reached a moment in this Cleveland Browns quarterback story that is so significant, so revealing, and so consequential for everything that follows between now and the start of the 2026 season that it demands the kind of complete and unflinching analysis that the situation has earned through weeks of escalating drama, contradictory reporting, organizational noise, and the kind of public confrontation between a franchise quarterback and a prominent media figure that simply does not happen when everything inside a football building is functioning the way it should be functioning. Todd Monken did his media tour today, and he did not look happy. Let that image sit with you for a moment before we go anywhere else, because the emotional and professional disposition of a head coach during a media appearance is itself a data point that deserves honest examination rather than dismissal. When a head coach sits down in front of cameras and microphones, and the body language, the tone, the overall energy he projects communicates something other than confident organizational leadership operating smoothly within a well-functioning structure, that tells you something real about the environment that coach is navigating behind closed doors. Coaches who are in control, coaches who are operating within organizational structures that empower them to make football decisions without constant external interference, coaches who feel genuine alignment between their vision and the institutional support behind it. Those coaches generally project a certain settled confidence during media appearances, even when the questions are difficult and even when the topics being covered are uncomfortable. Todd Monken did not project that today. And the reason he did not project that matters enormously for understanding the full picture of what is happening inside this Cleveland Browns organization right now. Because Monken made something very clear during this media appearance. He is going to have the quarterback situation figured out before the end of camp. He said it directly, and he said it with the kind of finality that reflects a man who has reached the limit of his patience with a situation that has been allowed to remain publicly unresolved for far longer than it should have been, given everything the practice field has shown and everything the organizational investment of the draft has communicated about the intended direction of this franchise. Before the end of camp. That is the timeline. That is the commitment. That is Todd Monken planting a flag in the ground and telling the media, the fanbase, and implicitly the people inside his own organization who have been feeding contradictory information to reporters and creating the narrative chaos that has characterized coverage of this quarterback competition, that the ambiguity is ending. That a decision will be communicated. That the public will know who the starting quarterback of the Cleveland Browns is before training camp concludes. Now let us understand what it means that this announcement had to be made at all, because in a fully functional NFL organization operating with genuine internal alignment, a head coach should not need to announce during a media tour that he will be resolving the quarterback situation before the end of camp. In a fully functional organization, the quarterback situation resolution would happen organically through the evaluation process, would be communicated through the appropriate channels at the appropriate time, and would not require a separate public commitment designed to impose a deadline on a process that has been allowed to drift publicly while different people within the organization say different things to different reporters about what is actually happening. The fact that Monken felt compelled to make this announcement, and the fact that he made it while visibly unhappy during an appearance on 92 The Fan's Ken Carman show, tells you that he is not operating in that kind of fully functional organizational environment. He is operating in an environment where his authority over the football decisions that fall squarely within his professional domain is being questioned, undermined, or at minimum complicated by organizational dynamics that originate above his level and that have produced the exact kind of contradictory public narrative that he is now trying to shut down through a direct timeline commitment. Let us talk about the Deshaun Watson financial argument that has entered this conversation, because it is being raised by voices including Chad Ochocinco, who suggested Watson should be named the starter based on the $60 million the Browns have paid him, and because this argument deserves to be addressed directly and dismissed clearly rather than allowed to linger as a pseudo-rationale for a decision that would be wrong on every level of football logic. Deshaun Watson has been receiving his contract money regardless of whether he plays or sits. That is the reality of his contractual situation with the Cleveland Browns. The money is guaranteed. The payments are happening. Whether Watson takes every snap in the 2026 season or sits on the bench watching Shedeur Sanders operate the offense from the sideline, the financial obligation the Cleveland Browns have to Deshaun Watson does not change. The check's clear either way. The salary cap implications are fixed either way. The organization is paying that money whether Watson plays or not. So the argument that Cleveland should start Watson because of the money they have paid him is not a football argument. It is not an organizational strategy argument. It is not even a reasonable financial argument when you examine it honestly, because the financial decision has already been made and cannot be unmade regardless of what happens at the quarterback competition. Paying Watson $60 million to sit on the bench is painful. It is an uncomfortable organizational reality that reflects decisions made under previous leadership and previous organizational philosophy. But paying Watson $60 million to play when Shedeur Sanders is the better quarterback and the player the organization has invested an entire draft class in developing, that does not recover a single dollar of the money already spent. It simply wastes the developmental opportunity that Sanders' presence on this roster represents while also wasting the offensive infrastructure investment made during the draft to support his success. You cannot make a bad financial decision less bad by making a bad football decision alongside it. The money is gone either way. The only variable that can still be optimized is the football outcome, and the football outcome is best served by starting the quarterback who gives this team the best chance to win games in 2026 and who has the highest developmental ceiling heading into the future seasons that matter most for where this franchise is going. That quarterback is Shedeur Sanders. Everything the practice field has shown, everything the draft investment has communicated, everything Todd Monken's structural decisions during minicamp have indicated, points to that conclusion. And the financial history with Watson is not a legitimate counterargument. It is a sunk cost being deployed as a justification for a football decision that the football evidence does not support. Now let us address Mary Kay Cabot directly in the context of Monken's appearance today, because the connection between what she has been reporting and what Monken communicated during this media tour is direct and observable and deserves to be named clearly. Monken's visible unhappiness during this appearance, his direct statement that the quarterback situation will be resolved before the end of camp, his overall demeanor during a conversation that touched on the ongoing controversy surrounding the quarterback competition narrative, all of it reflects the reality of a head coach who has watched his franchise quarterback get publicly undermined by reporting that presents opinion as fact, who has watched that reporting generate national controversy and player versus reporter confrontations that consume organizational attention and energy that should be focused entirely on football preparation, and who has had enough of the entire situation. When a head coach has to go on a radio show and essentially commit to ending the narrative chaos surrounding his quarterback competition, he is doing something that should never be necessary. He is performing organizational cleanup in a public forum because the information environment surrounding his team has become sufficiently dysfunctional that a direct public intervention is required to impose order on what should have been a managed and controlled process from the beginning. That level of public intervention from a head coach has costs. It consumes leadership capital. It reveals organizational vulnerabilities that sophisticated opponents will note and potentially exploit. It forces the coaching staff to spend time and energy on media narrative management that should be devoted entirely to the preparation of the football team for the competitive challenges of the upcoming season. None of those costs are trivial, and all of them are traceable directly to the reporting pattern that has created the narrative environment Monken is now trying to shut down through a timeline commitment made in a radio interview. The broader question of how Cleveland Browns reporters handle the distinction between news and opinion, which we addressed in our previous coverage following the direct confrontation between Sanders and Cabot, has not been resolved by Cabot's appearance on 92 The Fan defending her reporting. What Monken's unhappy media tour today confirms is that the damage created by presenting opinion as fact in a situation as sensitive and as consequential as a franchise quarterback competition is not contained within a single news cycle. It spreads. It generates confrontations. It forces coaches into media cleanup roles they should not be occupying. It creates organizational noise that disrupts the development environment the franchise quarterback needs to grow and succeed. Shedeur Sanders called it out directly when he went on that podcast and then followed up on his Twitch account. Monken is now calling it out through his demeanor and his timeline commitment during a media appearance where his unhappiness was visible to anyone watching with honest eyes. The national football media called it out through the reactions of voices like Mel Kiper and others who weighed in with the kind of external perspective that local access journalism sometimes cannot provide because local access comes with local obligations that compromise the willingness to say uncomfortable things clearly. All of those reactions are pointing in the same direction. The coverage of this quarterback situation has not served the interests of accurate and transparent journalism. It has served other interests. And the people responsible for it have created a situation where the head coach of the Cleveland Browns feels compelled to go on a radio show and announce that he will be resolving the quarterback competition before the end of camp because the public information environment has become sufficiently chaotic that a direct organizational intervention is now required to restore a baseline level of clarity. Before the end of camp. That is the promise. That is the timeline. And when that announcement comes, when Monken formally names his starting quarterback with the kind of direct and unambiguous organizational statement that ends the speculation and the narrative construction and the opinion-dressed as fact reporting that has plagued this situation for months, the question will be whether the people who created this mess through irresponsible reporting and contradictory organizational communications will acknowledge what they did and how it affected a franchise. Quarterback who deserved better from the information environment surrounding his team. Here is what the full weight of everything documented throughout this entire offseason points toward when you examine it honestly and without the distorting influence of access obligations or narrative protection instincts. Todd Monken knows who his quarterback is. He has known for a while. The practice field showed it. The draft showed it. His structural decisions during minicamp showed it. His public statements about Sanders' reps not being affected showed it. Andrew Berry's statement about expecting Sanders to have more command of the offense showed it. Every observable piece of football evidence available throughout this entire offseason has pointed toward the same conclusion about who the Cleveland Browns believe should and will be under center when the 2026 season begins. The noise around Watson, the reports about him taking the lead, the financial arguments being deployed to justify his candidacy, the organizational voices feeding contradictory information to reporters, all of that noise is exactly what it has appeared to be throughout this process. Noise. Organizational static generated by dynamics that originate outside the coaching staff's football decision-making process and that reflect ownership-level preferences and philosophies that have not always aligned with the football vision that Monken and Berry are trying to execute. Before the end of camp, that noise ends. Before the end of camp, a decision gets announced. Before the end of camp, the Cleveland Browns will tell their fanbase and the football world who their starting quarterback is in terms that cannot be walked back, reframed, or contradicted by subsequent reporting presenting opinion as organizational fact. And when that announcement comes, everything that has happened between the first day of minicamp when Shedeur Sanders stepped into 11 on 11 drills first, wearing the number 2 jersey and the helmet camera, and the moment Todd Monken stands in front of reporters and names his starter, will be rendered clear in retrospect in ways that some people in the Cleveland media landscape are not going to be comfortable examining honestly. The quarterback situation will be resolved before the end of camp. Todd Monken said so. And he said it while not looking happy, which means he means it in the way that people mean things when they have run out of patience with a situation that should have been simpler and cleaner and more organizationally unified than it has been allowed to become. Cleveland, the resolution is coming. Be ready for it. And when it arrives, remember everything that happened between now and then, because context is the only honest lens through which any of this can be properly understood.